The Insidious Dr. Fu-Manchu, by Sax Rohmer, Part 1. Chapter 1. A gentleman to see you, Doctor. From across the common a clock sounded the half-hour. 10:30, I said. A late visitor. Show him up, if you please. I pushed my writing aside and tilted the lampshade as footsteps sounded on the landing. The next moment I had jumped to my feet, for a tall, lean man, with his square-cut, clean-shaven face, sun-baked to the hue of coffee, entered and extended whom I had thought to be in Burma. "Smith," I said, and gripped his hands hard. "This is a delightful surprise. Whatever saw, whatever—" "Excuse me, Petrie," he broke in. "Don't put it down to the sun." And he put out the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I was too surprised to speak. "No doubt you will think me mad," he continued, and dimly I could see him at the window, peering out into the road, but before you are many hours older, you will know that I have good reason to be cautious. "Ah, nothing suspicious. Perhaps I am first this time." And stepping back to the writing table, he relighted the lamp. "Petrie? Well, I can put some material in your way that, if sheer uncanny mystery is a marketable commodity, ought to make you independent of influenza, and broken legs, and shattered nerves, and all the rest." I surveyed him doubtfully, but there was nothing in his appearance to justify me in supposing him to suffer from delusions. His eyes were too bright, certainly, and a hardness now had crept over his face. I got out the whiskey and siphon, saying, "You have taken your leave early." "I am not on leave," he replied, and slowly filled his pipe. "I am on duty." "On duty?" I exclaimed. "What, are you moved to London or something?" "I've got a roving commission, Petrie, and it doesn't rest with me where I am today, nor where I shall be tomorrow." There was something ominous in the words, and putting down my glass, its contents untasted, I faced round and looked him squarely in the eyes. "Out with it." "Out with it," I said. "What is it all about?" Smith suddenly stood up and stripped off his coat. Rolling back his left shirt sleeve, he revealed a wicked-looking wound in the fleshy part of the forearm. It was quite healed, but curiously striated for an inch or so around. "Ever seen one like it?" he asked. "Not exactly," I confessed. "It appears to have been deeply cauterized." "Right, very deeply," he rapped. A barb, steeped in the venom of a hamadryad, went in there. A shudder I could not repress ran coldly through me at mention of that most deadly of all the reptiles of the East. "There's only one treatment," he continued, rolling his sleeve down again, "and that's with a sharp knife, a match, and a broken cartridge." I lay on my back, raving, for 3 days afterwards, in a forest that stank with malaria, but I should have been lying there now if I had hesitated. Here's the point. It was not an accident. "What do you mean?" "I mean that it was a deliberate attempt on my life, and I am hard upon the tracks of the man who extracted that venom impatiently, drop by drop, from the poison glands of the snake, who prepared that arrow, and who caused it to be shot at me. What fiend is this? A fiend who, unless my calculations are at fault, is now in London, and who regularly wars with pleasant weapons of that kind. Petrie, I have travelled from Burma not in the interests of the British government merely, but in the interests of the entire white race, and I honestly believe, more I pray I may be wrong, that its survival depends largely upon the success of my mission. To say that I was perplexed conveys no idea of the mental chaos created by these extraordinary statements. For into my humdrum suburban life Nayland Smith had brought fantasy of the wildest. I did not know what to think, what to believe. "I am wasting precious time," he rapped decisively, and draining his glass he stood up. "I came straight to you, because you are the only man I dare to trust. Except the big chief at headquarters, you are the only person in England, I hope, who knows that Nayland Smith has quitted Burma. I must have someone with me, Petrie. All the time. It's imperative. Can you put me up here? And spare a few days to the strangest business, I promise you, that ever was recorded in fact or fiction." I agreed readily enough, for unfortunately, my professional duties were not onerous. "Good man!" he cried, wringing my hand in his impetuous way. "We start now." "What, tonight?" Tonight! I had thought of turning in, I must admit. I have not dared to sleep for 48 hours, except in 15-minute stretches, but there is one move that must be made tonight, and immediately. I must warn Sir Crichton Davy. Sir Crichton Davy, Muddy in Diapatree, he is a doomed man, unless he follows my instructions without question, without hesitation. Over heaven, nothing can save him. I do not know when the blow will fall, how it will fall, nor from whence, but I know that my first duty is to warn him. Let us walk down to the corner of the common and get a taxi. How strangely does the adventurous intrude upon the humdrum, for when it intrudes at all, more often than not its intrusion is sudden and unlooked for. Today we may seek for romance, and fail to find it. Unsought, it lies in wait for us at most. Prosaic corners of life's highway. The drive that night, though it divided the drably commonplace from the wildly bizarre, commas left no impression upon my mind. Into the heart of a weird mystery the cab bore me, and in reviewing my memories of those days, I wonder that the busy thoroughfares through which we passed did not display before my eyes signs and portents. It was not so. I recall nothing of the route and little of import that passed between us. We both were strangely silent, I think, until we were come to our journey's end. Then, what's this? What's this? Muttered my friend hoarsely. Constables were moving on, a little crowd of curious idlers who pressed about the steps of Sir Crichton Davy's house and sought to peer in at the open door. Without waiting for the cab to draw up to the curb, Mayland Smith recklessly leaped out, and I followed close at his heels. "What has happened?" he demanded breathlessly of a constable. The latter glanced at him doubtfully, but something in his voice and bearing commanded respect. "Sir Crichton Davy has been killed, sir." Smith lurched back as though he had received a physical blow, and clutched my shoulder convulsively. Beneath the heavy tan his face had blanched, and his eyes were set in a stare of horror. "My God," he whispered, "I am too late." With clenched fists he turned, and pressing through the group of loungers, bounded up the steps. In the hall, a man who unmistakably was a Scotland Yard official stood talking to a footman. Other members of the household were moving about, more or less aimlessly, and the chilly hand of King Fear had touched one and all, for as they came and went, they glanced ever over their shoulders, as if each shadow cloaked a menace, and listened, as it seemed, for some sound which they dreaded to hear. Smith strode up to the detective, and showed him a card, upon glancing at which the Scotland Yard man said something in a low voice, and nodding, touched his hat to Smith in a respectful manner. A few brief questions and answers, and in gloomy silence we followed the detective up the heavily carpeted stair, along a corridor lined with pictures and busts, and into a large library. A group of people were in this room, and one, in whom I recognized Chalmers Cleeve of Harley Street, was bending over a motionless form stretched upon a couch. Another door communicated with a small study, and through the opening I could see a man on all fours examining the carpet. The uncomfortable sense of hush, the group about the physician, the bizarre figure crawling, beetle-like, across the inner room, and the grim hub, around which all this ominous activity turned, made up a scene that etched itself indelibly on my mind. As we entered, Dr. Cleeve straightened himself, frowning thoughtfully. "Frankly, I do not care to venture any opinion at present regarding the immediate cause of death," he said. "Sir Crichton was addicted to cocaine, but there are indications which are not in accordance with cocaine. Poisoning, I fear that only a post-mortem can establish the facts." Quaif, he added, "we ever arrive at them. A most mysterious case." Smith stepping forward, and engaging the famous pathologist in conversation, I seized the opportunity to examine Sir Crichton's body. The dead man was in evening dress, but wore an old smoking jacket. He had been of spare but hardy build, with thin, aquiline features, which now were oddly puffy, as were his clenched hands. I pushed back his sleeve, and saw the marks of the hypodermic syringe upon his left arm. Quite mechanically, I turned my attention to the right arm. It was unscarred, but on the back of the hand was a faint red mark, not unlike the imprint of painted lips. I examined it closely, and even tried to rub it off, but it evidently was caused by some morbid process of local inflammation, if it were not a birthmark. Turning to a pale young man whom I had understood to be Sir Crichton's private secretary, I drew his attention to this mark, and inquired if it were constitutional. "It is not, sir," answered Dr. Cleeve, overhearing my question. "I have already made that inquiry. Does it suggest anything to your mind?" I must confess that it affords me no assistance. "Nothing," I replied. "It is most curious." "Excuse me, Mr. Burboyne," said Smith, now turning to the secretary, "but Inspector Weymouth will tell you that I act with authority. I understand that Sir Crichton was seized with illness in his study." "Yes, come at 10:30. I was working here in the library, and he inside as was our custom. The communicating door was kept closed." "Yes, always. It was open for a minute or less about 10:25, when a message came for Sir Crichton. I took it in to him, and he then seemed in his usual health. What was the message? I could not say. It was brought by a district messenger, and he placed it beside him on the table. It is there now, no doubt, and at 10:30. Sir Crichton suddenly burst open the door and threw himself, with a scream, into the library. I ran to him, but he waved me back. His eyes were glaring horribly. I had just reached his side when he fell, writhing, upon the floor. He seemed past speech, but as I raised him and laid him upon the couch, he gasped something that sounded like the Red Hand. Before I could get to bell or telephone, he was dead. "Mr." Burboyne's voice shook as he spoke the words, and Smith seemed to find this evidence confusing. "You do not think he referred to the mark on his own hand?" "I think not. From the direction of his last glance, I feel sure he referred to something in the study." "What did you do?" Having summoned the servants, I ran into the study, but there was absolutely nothing unusual to be seen. The windows were closed and fastened. He worked with closed windows in the hottest weather. There is no other door, for the study occupies the end of a narrow wing, so that no one could possibly have gained access to it. Whilst I was in the library, unseen by me. Had someone concealed himself in the study earlier in the evening? And I am convinced that it offers no hiding place. There could only have come out again by passing through here. Nayland Smith tugged at the lobe of his left ear, as was his habit when meditating. "You had been at work here in this way for some time? Yes?" Sir Crichton was preparing an important book. "Had anything unusual occurred prior to this evening?" "Yes," said Mr. Burboyne, with evident perplexity, though I attached no importance to it at the time. 3 nights ago Sir Crichton came out to me, and appeared very nervous, but at times his nerves— "Do you know?" "Well, on this occasion he asked me to search the study. He had an idea that something was concealed there. Some thing or someone. Something was the word he used. I searched, but fruitlessly, and he seemed quite satisfied, and returned to his work." "Thank you, Mr. Burboyne. My friend and I would like a few minutes' private investigation in the study." Chapter 2. Sir Crichton Davy's study was a small one, and a glance sufficed to show that, as the secretary had said, it offered no hiding place. It was heavily carpeted, and overfull of Burmese and Chinese ornaments and curios, and upon the mantelpiece stood several framed photographs, which showed this to be the sanctum of a wealthy bachelor who was no misogynist. A map of the Indian Empire occupied the larger part of one wall. The grate was empty, for the weather was extremely warm, and a green-shaded lamp on the littered writing table afforded the only light. The air was stale, for both windows were closed and fastened. Smith immediately pounced upon a large square envelope that lay beside the blotting pad. Sir Crichton had not even troubled to open it, but my friend did so. It contained a blank sheet of paper. "Smell," he directed, handing the letter to me. I raised it to my nostrils. It was scented with some pungent perfume. "What is it?" I asked. "It is a rather rare essential oil," was the reply, "which I have met with before, though never in Europe." "I begin to understand, Petrie." He tilted the lampshade and made a close examination of the scraps of paper, matches, and other debris that lay in the grate and on the hearth. I took up a copper vase from the mantelpiece and was examining it curiously. When he turned, a strange expression upon his face. "Put that back, old man," he said quietly, much surprised I did as he directed. "Don't touch anything in the room. It may be dangerous." Something in the tone of his voice chilled me, and I hastily replaced the vase, and stood by the door of the study, watching him search, methodically, every inch of the room, foes behind the books, in all the ornaments, in table drawers, in cupboards, on shelves. "That will do," he said at last. "There is nothing here, and I have no time to search farther." We returned to the library. "Inspector Weymouth," said my friend, "I have a particular reason for asking that Sir Crichton's body be removed from this room at once, and the library locked. Let no one be admitted on any pretense whatever until you hear from me." It spoke volumes for the mysterious credentials borne by my friend that the man from Scotland Yard accepted his orders without demur. And after a brief chat with Mr. Burboyne, Smith passed briskly downstairs. In the hall, a man who looked like a groom out of livery was waiting. "Are you Wills?" asked Smith. "Yes, sir. It was you who heard a cry of some kind at the rear of the house about the time of Sir Crichton's death." "Yes, sir." "I was locking the garage door, and, happening to look up at the window of Sir Crichton's study, I saw him jump out of his chair. Where he used to sit at his writing, sir, you could see his shadow on the blind." Next minute, I heard a call out in the lane. What kind of call? The man, whom the uncanny happening clearly had frightened, seemed puzzled for a suitable description. "A sort of wail, sir," he said at last. "I never heard anything like it before, and don't want to again." "Like this?" inquired Smith, and he uttered a low, wailing cry impossible to describe. Wills perceptibly shuddered, and indeed it was an eerie sound. "The same, sir, I think," he said, "but much louder." "That will do," said Smith, and I thought I detected a note of triumph in his voice. "But stay, take us through to the back of the house." The man bowed and led the way, so that shortly we found ourselves in a small, paved courtyard. It was a perfect summer's night, and the deep blue vault above was jewelled with myriads of starry points. How impossible it seemed to reconcile that vast, eternal calm with the hideous passions and fiendish agencies which that night had loosed a soul upon the infinite. "Up yonder are the study windows, sir. Over that wall on your left is the back lane from which the cry came, and beyond is Regent's Park. Are the study windows visible from there?" "Oh, yes, sir. Who occupies the adjoining house?" "Major General Platt Houston, sir, but the family is out of town." "Those iron stairs are a means of communication between the domestic offices and the servants' quarters." "I take it. Yes, sir." "Then send someone to make my business known to the Major General's housekeeper. I want to examine those stairs." Singular though my friend's proceedings appeared to me, I had ceased to wonder at anything. Since Nayland Smith's arrival at my rooms, I seemed to have been moving through the fitful phases of a nightmare. My friend's account of how he came by the wound in his arm, the scene on our arrival at the house of Sir Crichton Davy, the secretary's story of the dying man's cry, the red hand, the hidden perils of the study, the wail in the lane, all were fitter incidents of delirium than of sane reality. So, when a white-faced butler made us known to a nervous old lady, who proved to be the housekeeper of the next-door residence, I was not surprised at Smith saying, "Everyone has cleared off now. It is getting late. Keep your eyes open, and be on your guard." I thought I had the start, but he is here before me, and, what is worse, he probably knows by now that I am here too. With which he entered the house and left me out in the square, with leisure to think, to try to understand. The crowd which usually haunts the scene of a sensational crime had been cleared away, and it had been circulated that Sir Crichton had died from natural causes. The intense heat, having driven most of the residents out of town, practically I had the square to myself, and I gave myself up to a brief consideration of the mystery in which I so suddenly had found myself involved. By what agency had Sir Crichton met his death? Did Nayland Smith know? I rather suspected that he did. What was the hidden significance of the perfumed envelope? Who was that mysterious personage whom Smith so evidently dreaded? Who had attempted his life? who, presumably, had murdered Sir Crichton. Sir Crichton Davy, during the time that he had held office in India, and during his long term of service at home, had earned the goodwill of all, British and native alike. Who was his secret enemy? Something touched me lightly on the shoulder. I turned, with my heart fluttering like a child's. This night's work had imposed a severe strain even upon my callous nerves. A girl, wrapped in a hooded opera cloak, stood at my elbow. With the skin of a perfect blonde, she had eyes and lashes, as black as a Creole's, which together with her full red lips told me that this beautiful stranger, whose touch had so startled me, was not a child of our northern shores. "Forgive me," she said, speaking with an odd, pretty accent, and laying a slim hand with jewelled fingers confidingly upon my arm, "if I startled you. But is it true that Sir Crichton Davy has been commandeered?" I looked into her big questioning eyes, a harsh suspicion labouring in my mind, but could read nothing in their mysterious depths, only I wondered anew at my questioner's beauty. The grotesque idea momentarily possessed me that were the bloom of her red lips due to art and not to nature, their kiss would leave, should know not indelibly, just such a mark as I had seen upon the dead man's hand. But I dismissed the fantastic notion as bred of the night's horrors, and worthy only of a medieval legend. No doubt she was some friend or acquaintance of Sir Crichton, who lived close by. "I cannot say that he has been murdered," I replied, acting upon the latter supposition, and seeking to tell her what she asked as gently as possible. "But he is dead?" I nodded. She closed her eyes and uttered a low, moaning sound, swaying dizzily. Thinking she was about to swoon, I threw my arm round her shoulder to support her, but she smiled sadly and pushed me gently away. "I am quite well, thank you," she said. "You are certain? Let me walk with you until you feel quite sure of yourself." She shook her head, flashed a rapid glance at me with her beautiful eyes, and looked away in a sort of sorrowful embarrassment, for which I was entirely at a loss to account. "Suddenly," she resumed, "I cannot let my name be mentioned in this dreadful matter, but in she-fable matter, but I think I have some information. Some for the police. Will you give this too? Whenever you think proper." She handed me a sealed envelope, again met my eyes, with one of her dazzling glances, and hurried away. She had gone no more than 10 or 12 yards, and I still was standing bewildered, watching her graceful, retreating figure, when she turned abruptly and came back, without looking directly at me, but alternately glancing towards a distant corner of the square and towards the house of Major General Platt Houston. She made the following extraordinary request: "If you would do me a very great service, for which I always would be grateful." It glanced at me with passionate intentness. "When you have given my message to the proper person, leave him, and do not go near him any more tonight." Before I could find words to reply, she gathered up her cloak and ran. Before I could determine whether or not to follow her, for her words had aroused anew all my worst suspicions, she had disappeared. I heard the whir of a restarted motor at no great distance, and, in the instant that Nayland Smith came running down the steps, I knew that I had nodded at my post. "Smith!" I cried as he joined me. "Tell me what we must do." And rapidly I acquainted him with the incident. My friend looked very grave. Then a grim smile crept round his lips. She was a big card to play, he said, but he did not know that I held one to beat it. "What? You know this girl?" "Who is she?" "She is one of the finest weapons in the enemy's armory, Petrie. But a woman is a two-edged sword, and treacherous. To our great good fortune she has formed a sudden predilection, characteristically Oriental, for yourself. Oh, you may scoff, but it is evident. She was employed to get this letter placed in my hands. Give it to me?" I did so. "She has succeeded. Smell." He held the envelope under my nose, and with a sudden sense of nausea, I recognized the strange perfume. "You know what this presaged in Sir Crichton's case? Can you doubt any longer? She did not want you to share my fate, Petrie." "Smith," I said unsteadily, "I have followed your lead blindly in this horrible business, and have not pressed for an explanation. but I must insist before I go one step farther upon knowing what it all means. Just a few steps farther, he rejoined. As far as a cab. We are hardly safe here. Oh, you need not fear shots or knives. The man whose servants are watching us now scorns to employ such clumsy, telltale weapons. Only 3 cabs were on the rank, and, as we entered the first, something hissed past my ear, missed both Smith and me by a miracle, and, passing over the roof of the taxi, presumably fell in the enclosed garden occupying the centre of the square. "What was that?" I cried. "Get in quickly," Smith rapped back. "It was attempt number 1. More than that I cannot say. Don't let the man hear. He has noticed nothing. Pull up the window on your side, Petrie, and look out behind." "Good, we've started." The cab moved off with a metallic jerk, and I turned and looked back through the little window in the rear. Someone has got into another cab. It is following ours, I think. Nayland Smith lay back and laughed unmirthfully. "Petrie," he said, "if I escape alive from this business, I shall know that I bear a charmed life." I made no reply as he pulled out the dilapidated pouch and filled his pipe. "You have asked me to explain matters," he continued, "and I will do so to the best of my ability. You no doubt wonder why a servant of the British government, lately stationed in Burma, suddenly appears in London in the character of a detective. I am here, Petrie. Would I bear credentials from the very highest sources? Because quite by accident, I came upon a clue. Following it up, in the ordinary course of routine, I obtained evidence of the existence and malignant activity of a certain man. At the present stage of the case, I should not be justified in terming him the emissary of an Eastern power, but I may say that representations are shortly to be made to that power's ambassador in London." He paused and glanced back towards the pursuing cab. "There is little to fear until we arrive home," he said calmly. "Afterwards there is much. To continue, this man, whether a fanatic or a duly appointed agent, is unquestionably the most malign and formidable personality existing in the known world today. He is a linguist who speaks with almost equal facility in any of the civilized languages, and in most of the barbaric. He is an adept in all the arts and sciences, which a great university could teach him. He also is an adept in certain obscure arts and sciences which no university of today can teach. He has the brains of any 3 men of genius, of Petrie. He is a mental giant. You amaze me," I said. "As to his mission among men. Why did Monsieur Jules Furneaux fall dead in a Paris opera house? Because of heart failure? No, because his last speech had shown that he held the key to the secret of Tonking. What became of the Grand Duke Stanislaus? Elopement? Suicide? Nothing of the kind. He alone was fully alive to Russia's growing peril. He alone knew the truth about Mongolia. Why was Sir Crichton Davy murdered? Because, had the work he was engaged upon ever seen the light, it would have shown him to be the only living Englishman who understood the importance of the Tibetan frontiers. I say to you solemnly, Petrie, that these are but a few. Is there a man who would arouse the West to a sense of the awakening of the East, who would teach the deaf to hear, the blind to see, that the millions only await their leader? He will die. This is only one phase of the devilish campaign. The others I can merely surmise. But Smith, this is almost incredible. What perverted genius controls this awful secret movement? Imagine a person, tall, lean, and feline, high-shouldered, with a brow like Shakespeare and a face like Satan, a close-shaven skull, and long magnetic eyes of the true cat green. Invest him with all the cruel cunning of an entire Eastern race, accumulated in one giant intellect, with all the resources of science past and present, with all the resources, if you will, of a wealthy government, no which, however, already has denied all knowledge of his existence. Imagine that awful being, and you have a mental picture of Dr. Fu-Manchu, the yellow peril incarnate in one man. Chapter 3. I sank into an armchair in my rooms and gulped down a strong peg of brandy. "We have been followed here," I said. "Why did you make no attempt to throw the pursuers off the track, to have them intercepted?" Smith laughed. "Useless in the first place. Wherever we went he would find us. and of what use to arrest his creatures. We could prove nothing against them. Further, it is evident that an attempt is to be made upon my life. Tonight can I the same means that proved so successful in the case of poor Sir Crichton. His square jaw grew truculently prominent, and he leapt stormily to his feet, shaking his clenched fists to "The villain!" he cried. "The fiendishly clever villain!" I suspected that Sir Crichton was next, and I was right. But I came too late, Petrie. That hits me hard, old man. To think that I knew and yet failed to save him. He resumed his seat, smoking hard. Fu-Manchu has made the blunder common to all men of unusual genius, he said. He has underrated his adversary. He has not given me credit for perceiving the meaning of the scented messages. He has thrown away one powerful weapon to get such a message into my hands. Shelley thinks that once safe within doors, I shall sleep, unsuspecting, and die as Sir Crichton died. But without the indiscretion of your charming friend, I should have known what to expect when I receive her information, into which, by the way, consists of a blank sheet of paper. Smith, I broke in. Who is she? She is either Fu-Manchu's daughter, his wife, or his slave. I am inclined to believe the last, for she has no will but his will, except, toss with a quizzical glance, to in a certain instance. How can you jest with some awful thing, not heaven knows what, con hanging over your head? What is the meaning of these perfumed envelopes? How did Sir Crichton die? He died of the Zayat kiss. Ask me what that is, and I reply, I do not know. The Zayats are the Burmese caravanserais, or rest houses, along a certain route, cause upon which I set eyes, for the first and only time, upon Dr. Fu-Manchu. Some travellers who use them sometimes die, as Sir Crichton died, with nothing to show the cause of death but a little mark upon the neck, face, or limb, which has earned, in those parts, the title of the Zayat kiss. The rest houses along that route are shunned now. I have my theory, and I hope to prove it tonight, if I live. It will be one more broken weapon in his fiendish armoury, and it is thus, and thus only, that I can hope to crush him. This was my principal reason for not enlightening Dr. Cleeve. Even walls have ears where Fu-Manchu is concerned, so I feigned ignorance of the meaning of the mark, knowing that he would be almost certain to employ the same methods upon some other victim. I wanted an opportunity, study the Zayat kiss in operation, and I shall have one. But the scented envelopes, in the swampy forests of the district, I have referred to a rare species of orchid, almost green, and with a peculiar scent, is sometimes met with. I recognized the heavy perfume at once. I take it that the thing which kills the traveller is attracted by this orchid. You will notice that the perfume clings to whatever it touches. I doubt if it can be washed off in the ordinary way, after at least one unsuccessful attempt to kill Sir Crichton. Also recall that he thought there was something concealed in his study on a previous occasion. Fu-Manchu hit upon the perfumed envelopes. He may have a supply of these green orchids in his possession, possibly to feed the creature. What creature? How could any kind of creature have got into Sir Crichton's room tonight? You no doubt observed that I examined the grate of the study. I found a fair quantity of fallen soot. I at once assumed, since it appeared to be the only means of entrance, that something has been dropped down, and I took it for granted that the thing, whatever it was, must still be concealed either in the study or in the library. But when I had obtained the evidence of the groom, Wills, I perceived that the cry from the lane, or from the park, was a signal. I noted that the movements of anyone seated at the study table were visible, in shadow, on the blind, and that the study occupied the corner of a two-storied wing, and therefore had a short chimney. What did the signal mean? That Sir Crichton had leaped up from his chair, and either had received the Zayat kiss, or had seen the thing which someone on the roof had lowered down the straight chimney. It was the signal to withdraw that deadly thing. By means of the iron stairway, at the rear of Major General Platt Houston's, I quite easily gained access to the roof above Sir Crichton's study. Bickhand, I found this. Out from his pocket Nayland Smith drew a tangled piece of silk, mixed up with which were a brass ring and a number of unusually large-sized split shot, nipped on in the manner usual on a fishing line. My theory proven, he resumed. Not anticipating a search on the roof, they had been careless. This was to weight the line and to prevent the creature clinging to the walls of the chimney. Directly it had dropped in the grate, however, by means of this ring I assumed that the weighted line was withdrawn, and the thing was only held by one slender thread, which sufficed, though, to draw it back again when it had done its work. It might have got tangled, of course, but they reckoned on its making straight up the carved leg of the writing table for the prepared envelope. From there to the hand of Sir Crichton, which, from having touched the envelope, would also be scented with the perfume. Thus a certain move would also be scented with the perfume. Dispose a certain move. My God! Shape! What colour? What is something that moves rapidly and silently? Hand. I will venture no more at present, but I think it works in the dark. The study was dark, remember, save for the bright patch beneath the reading lamp. I have observed that the rear of this house is ivy-covered right up to and above your bedroom. Let us make ostentatious preparations to retire, and I think we may rely upon Fu-Manchu's servants to attempt my removal. At any rate, Chef, not yours. But, my dear fellow, it is a climb of 35 feet at the very least. You remember the cry in the back lane? It suggested something to me, and I tested my idea. Successfully to me, and I tested my idea. Successfully. It was the cry of a dacoit. Oh, dacoity, though quiescent, is by no means extinct. Fu-Manchu has dacoits in his train, and probably it is one who operates the Zayat kiss, since it was a dacoit who watched the window of the study this evening. To such a man, an ivy-covered wall is a grand staircase. The horrible events that followed are punctuated in my mind by the striking of a distant clock. It is singular how trivialities thus assert themselves in moments of high tension. I will proceed, then, by these punctuations, to the coming of the horror that it was written we should encounter. The clock across the common struck 2. Having removed all traces of the scent of the orchid from our hands with a solution of ammonia, Smith and I had followed the programme laid down. It was an easy matter to reach the rear of the house, by simply climbing a fence, and we did not doubt that seeing the light go out in the front, our unseen watcher would proceed to the back. The room was a large one, and we had made up my camp bed at one end, stuffing odds and ends under the clothes, to lend the appearance of a sleeper, which device we also had adopted in the case of the larger bed. The perfumed envelope lay upon a little coffee table in the centre of the floor, and Smith, with an electric pocket lamp, a revolver, and a brassey beside him, sat on cushions in the shadow of the wardrobe. I occupied a post between the windows. No unusual sound so far had disturbed the stillness of the night, save for the muffled throb of the rare all-night cars passing the front of the house. Our vigil had been a silent one. The full moon had painted about the floor weird shadows of the clustering ivy, spreading the design gradually from the door, across the room, past the little table where the envelope lay, and finally to the foot of the bed. The distant clock struck 2:15. A slight breeze stirred the ivy, and a new shadow added itself to the extreme edge of the moon's design. Something rose, inch by inch, above the sill of the westerly window. I could see only its shadow, but a sharp, sibilant breath from Smith told me that he, from his post, could see the cause of the shadow. Every nerve in my body seemed to be strung tensely. I was icy cold, expectant, and prepared for whatever horror was upon us. The shadow became stationary. The dacoit was studying the interior of the room. Then it suddenly lengthened, and craning my head to the left, I saw a lithe, black-clad form, surmounted by a yellow face, sketchy in the moonlight, pressed against the window panes. One thin brown hand appeared over the edge of the lowered sash, which it grasped. Stubborn, then another. The man made absolutely no sound whatever. The second hand disappeared. This hand reappeared. It held a small square box. There was a very faint click. The dacoit swung himself below the window with the agility of an ape, as with a dull, muffled thud, something dropped upon the carpet. "Stand still for your life," came Smith's voice, high-pitched. A beam of white leaped out across the room and played full upon the coffee table in the centre. Prepared as I was for something horrible, I know that I paled at sight of the thing that was running round the edge of the envelope. It was an insect, full 6 inches long, and of a vivid, venomous red colour. It had something of the appearance of a great ant, with its long, quivering antennae and its febrile, horrible vitality, but it was proportionately longer of body and smaller of head. In short, it was a giant centipede, apparently of the Scolopendra group, but of a form quite new to me. These things I realized in one breathless instant. In the next, kstunts, sith as life, out with one straight ending quite. True blow of the golf club. I leaped to the window and threw it, widely open, feeling a silk thread brush my hand as I did so. A black shape was dropping, with incredible agility from branch to branch of the ivy, and, without once offering a mark for a revolver shot, it merged into the shadows beneath the trees of the garden. As I turned and switched on the light, Nayland Smith dropped limply into a chair, leaning his head upon his hands. Even that grim courage had been tried sorely. "Never mind the dacoit, Petrie," he said. "Nemesis will know where to find him. We know now what causes the mark of the Zayat kiss. Therefore science is richer for our first brush with the enemy, and the enemy is poorer, or unless he has any more unclassified centipedes. I understand now, something that has been puzzling me, since I heard of it. Insekritan's stifled cry, when we remember that he was almost past speech. It is reasonable to suppose that his cry was not the red hand, but the red ant. Petrie, to think that I failed, by less than an hour, to save him from such an end." Chapter 4. The body of a Lascar, dressed in the manner usual on the P&O boats, was recovered from the Thames off Tilbury by the river police at 6 a.m. this morning. It is supposed that the man met with an accident in leaving his ship. Nayland Smith passed me the evening paper, and pointed to the above paragraph. "For Lascar read dacoit," he said. "Our visitor, who came by way of the ivy, fortunately for us, failed to follow his instructions. Also, he lost the centipede and left a clue behind him. Dr. Fu-Manchu does not overlook such lapses. It was a sidelight upon the character of the awful being with whom we had to deal. My very soul recoiled from bare consideration of the fate that would be ours if ever we fell into his hands." The telephone bell rang. I went out and found that Inspector Weymouth of New Scotland Yard had called us up. "Will Mr. Nayland Smith please come to the Wapping River Police Station at once?" was the message. Peaceful interludes were few enough throughout that wild pursuit. "It is certainly something important," said my friend. "And if Fu-Manchu is at the bottom of it, else we must presume him to be, it is probably something ghastly." A brief survey of the timetables showed us that there were no trains to serve our haste. We accordingly chartered a cab and proceeded east. Smith, throughout the journey, talked entertainingly about his work in Burma. Of intent, I think, he avoided any reference to the circumstances which first had brought him in contact with the sinister genius of the Yellow Movement. His talk was rather of the sunshine of the East than of its shadows, but the drive concluded, circumvent all too soon. In a silence which neither of us seemed disposed to break, we entered the police depot, and followed an officer who received us into the room where Weymouth waited. The inspector greeted us briefly, nodding toward the table. "Poor Cadby, the most promising lad at the yard," he said, and his usually gruff voice had softened strangely. Smith struck his right fist into the palm of his left hand, and swore under his breath, striding up and down the neat little room. No one spoke for a moment, and in the silence I could hear the whispering of the Thames outside, of the Thames which had so many strange secrets to tell, and now was burdened with another. The body lay prone upon the deal table, piece latest of the river's dead. Dressed in rough sailor garb, and to all outward seeming, a seaman of nondescript nationality. To such as is no stranger in Wapping and Shadwell. His dark, curly hair clung clammily about the brown forehead. His skin was stained, they told me. He wore a gold ring in one ear, and 3 fingers of the left hand were missing. It was almost the same with Mason. The river police inspector was speaking. A week ago on a Wednesday, he went off in his own time, on some funny business down St. George's way. Just then Thursday night, the 10 o'clock boat got the grapnel on him off Hanover Hole. His first 2 fingers on the right hand were clean gone, and his left hand was mutilated frightfully. He paused and glanced at Smith. "That Lascar too," he continued. "That you came down to see, sir? You remember his hands?" Smith nodded. "He was not a Lascar," he said shortly. "He was a dacoit." Silence fell again. I turned to the array of objects lying on the table, come those which had been found in Cadby's clothing. None of them were noteworthy, except that which had been found thrust into the loose neck of his shirt. This last it was, which had led the police to send for Nayland Smith, for it constituted the first clue which had come to light, pointing to the authors of these mysterious tragedies. It was a Chinese pigtail. That alone was sufficiently remarkable, but it was rendered more so by the fact that the plaited queue was a false one, being attached to a most ingenious bald wig. "You're sure it wasn't part of a Chinese make-up?" questioned Weymouth, his eye on the strange relic. Cadby was clever at disguise. Smith snatched the wig from my hands with a certain irritation, and tried to fit it on the dead detective. "Too small by inches," he jerked. "And look how it's padded in the crown. This thing was made for a most abnormal head." He threw it down, and fell to pacing the room again. "Where did you find him?" "Exactly," he asked. "Limehouse Reach, Shigonda Commercial Dock Pier, exactly an hour ago." "And you last saw him at 8 o'clock last night?" "Shab to Weymouth." 8 to a quarter past. "You think he has been dead nearly 24 hours, Petrie?" "Roughly 24 hours, I replied. "Then we know that he was on the track of the Fu-Manchu group, that he followed up some clue, which led him to the neighbourhood of Old Ratcliffe Highway, and that he died the same night. You are sure that is where he was going?" "Yes," said Weymouth. "He was jealous of giving anything away, poor chap. It meant a big lift for him if he pulled the case off. But he gave me to understand that he expected to spend last night in that district. He left the yard about 8, as I've said, to go to his rooms and dress for the job." "Did he keep any record of his cases?" "Of course. He was most particular. Cadby was a man with ambition, sir. You'll want to see his book." "Wait while I get his address. It's somewhere in Brixton." He went to the telephone, and Inspector Ryman covered up the dead man's face. Nayland Smith was palpably excited. "He almost succeeded where we have failed, Petrie," he said. "There is no doubt in my mind that he was hot on the track of Fu-Manchu. Poor Mason had probably blundered on the scent, too. Without other evidence, the fact that they both died in the same way as the dacoit would be conclusive. For we know that Fu-Manchu killed the dacoit. What is the meaning of the mutilated hands, Smith?" "God knows. Cadby's death was from drowning, you say? There are no other marks of violence." "But he was a very strong swimmer, Doctor," interrupted Inspector Ryman. "Why, he pulled off the quarter-mile championship at the Crystal Palace last year. Cadby wasn't a man easy to drown. And as for Mason, he was an R.N.R. and like a fish in the water." Smith shrugged his shoulders helplessly. "Let us hope that one day we shall know how they died," he said simply. Weymouth returned from the telephone. "The address is no Gold Harbour Lane," he reported. "I shall not be able to come along, but you can't miss it. It's close by the Brixton police station. There's no family, fortunately. He was quite alone in the world. His casebook isn't in the American desk, which you'll find in his sitting room. It's in the cupboard in the corner, except top shelf. Here are his keys, all intact." "I think this is the cupboard key." Smith nodded. "Come on, Petrie," he said. "We haven't a second to waste." Our cab was waiting, and in a few seconds we were speeding along Wapping High Street. We had gone no more than a few 100 yards, I think, when Smith suddenly slapped his open hand down on his knee. "That pigtail," he cried. "I have left it behind. We must have it, Petrie. Stop, stop." The cab was pulled up, and Smith alighted. "Don't wait for me," he directed hurriedly. "Here, take Weymouth's card. Remember where he said the book was. It's all we want. Come straight on to Scotland Yard and meet me there." "But Smith," I protested. "A few minutes can make no difference, can't it?" he snapped. "Do you suppose Fu-Manchu is going to leave evidence like that lying about? It's 1,000 to 1 he has it already, but there is just a bare chance. It was a new aspect of the situation, and one that afforded no room for comment, and so lost in thought did I become, that the cab was outside the house for which I was bound, ere I realized that we had quitted the purlieus of Wapping. Yet I had had leisure to review the whole troop of events which had crowded my life since the return of Nayland Smith from Burma. Mentally, I had looked again upon the dead Sir Crichton Davy, and with Smith had waited in the dark for the dreadful thing that had killed him. Now, with those remorseless memories jostling in my mind, I was entering the house of Fu-Manchu's last victim, and the shadow of that giant evil seemed to be upon it like a palpable cloud. Cadby's old landlady greeted me with a queer mixture of fear and embarrassment in her manner. "I am Dr. Petrie," I said, "and I regret that I bring bad news respecting Mr. Cadby." "Oh, sir," she cried, "don't tell me that anything has happened to him," and divining something of the mission on which I was come, for such sad duty often falls to the lot of the medical man. Oh, the poor brave lad! Indeed, I respected the dead man's memory more than ever from that hour, since the sorrow of the worthy old soul was quite pathetic, and spoke eloquently for the unhappy cause of it. There was a terrible wailing at the back of the house last night, Doctor, and I heard it again tonight, a second before you knocked. Poor lad! It was the same when his mother died. At the moment I paid little attention to her words, for such beliefs are common, unfortunately, but when she was sufficiently composed I went on to explain what I thought necessary. And now the old lady's embarrassment took precedence of her sorrow, and presently the truth came out. "There's a young lady, then his room, sir." I started. This might mean little or might mean much. She came and waited for him last night, Doctor, some 10 until past, and this morning again. She came the third time about an hour ago, and has been upstairs since. Do you know her, Mrs. Dolan, Mrs. Dolan? Mrs. Ingarn Orpheus. Dolan, Mrs. Dolan grew embarrassed again. "Well, Doctor," she said, wiping her eyes the while, "I do, and God knows he was a good lad, and I like a mother to him, but she is not the girl I should have liked a son of mine to take up with. At any other time, this would have been amusing. Now it might be serious." Mrs. Dolan's account of the wailing became suddenly significant, for perhaps it meant that one of Fu-Manchu's dacoit followers was watching the house, to give warning of any stranger's approach. Warning to whom? It was unlikely that I should forget the dark eyes of another of Fu-Manchu's servants. Was that law of men even now in the house, completing her evil work? "I should never have allowed her in his rooms." "Pshaw," began Mrs. B., worse that lure of men even now in the house. Completing her evil work, "I should never have allowed her in his rooms," to began Mrs. Dolan again. Then there was an interruption. A soft rustling reached my ears, intimately feminine. The girl was stealing down. I leapt out into the hall, and she turned and fled blindly before me, more back up the stairs. Taking 3 steps at a time, I followed her, bounded into the room above almost at her heels, and stood with my back to the door. She cowered against the desk by the window, a slim figure in a clinging silk gown, which alone explained Mrs. Dolan's distrust. The gaslight was turned very low, and her hat shadowed her face, but could not hide its startling beauty, could not mar the brilliancy of the skin, nor dim the wonderful eyes of this modern Delilah. For it was she. "So I came in time," I said grimly, and turned the key in the lock. "Oh," she panted at that, and stood facing me, leaning back with her jewel-laden hands clutching the desk edge. "Give me whatever you have removed from here," I said sternly, "and then prepare to accompany me." She took a step forward, her eyes wide with fear, her lips parted. "I have taken nothing," she said. Her breast was heaving tumultuously. "Oh, let me go! Please let me go!" And impulsively she threw herself forward, pressing clasped hands against my shoulder, and looking up into my face with passionate, pleading eyes. It is with some shame that I confess how her charm enveloped me. Like a magic cloud, unfamiliar with the complex Oriental temperament, I had laughed at Nayland Smith when he had spoken of this girl's infatuation. "Love in the East," he had said, is like the conjurer's mango tree. It is born, grows, and flowers at the touch of a hand. Now, in those pleading eyes, I read confirmation of his words. Her clothes or her hair exhaled a faint perfume. Like all Fu-Manchu's servants, she was perfectly chosen for her peculiar duties. Her beauty was wholly intoxicating, but I thrust her away. "You have no claim to mercy," I said. "Do not count upon any. What have you taken from here?" She grasped the lapels of my coat. "I will tell you all I can." "Well, I dare," she panted eagerly, fearfully. "I should know how to deal with your friend, but with you I am lost. If you could only understand, you would not be so cruel." Her slight accent added charm to the musical voice. "I am not free as your English women are. What I do I must do, for it is the will of my master, and I am only a slave. Ah, you are not a man, if you can give me to the police. You have no heart if you can forget that I tried to save you once." I had feared that plea, for, in her own oriental fashion, she certainly had tried to save me from a deadly peril once, at the expense of my friend. But I had feared the plea, for I did not know how to meet it. How could I give her up, perhaps, to stand her trial for murder? And now I fell silent, and she saw why I was silent. I may deserve no mercy. I may be even as bad as you think. But what have you to do with the police? It is not your work to hound a woman to death. Could you ever look another woman in the eyes? Own that you loved, and know that she trusted you. She, if you had done such a thing. Ah, I have no friend in all the world, or I should not be here. Do not be my enemy, my judge, and make me worse than I am. Be my friend, and save me." So from him the tremulous lips were close to mine. Her breath fanned my cheek. "Have mercy on me." At that moment, I honestly would have given half of my worldly possessions to have been spared the decision which I knew I must come to. After all, what proof had I that she was a willing accomplice of Dr. Fu-Manchu? Furthermore, she was an Oriental, and her code must necessarily be different from mine. Irreconcilable, as the thing may be with Western ideas, Nayland Smith had really told me that he believed the girl to be a slave. Then there remained that other reason why I loathed the idea of becoming her captor. It was almost tantamount to betrayal. Must I soil my hands with such work? Thus, some suppose, horror seductive, beauty argued against my sense of right. The jeweled fingers grasped my shoulders nervously, and her slim body quivered against mine as she watched me, with all her soul in her eyes, in an abandonment of pleading despair. Then I remembered the fate of the man in whose room we stood. "You lured Cadby to his death," I said, and shook her off. "No, no," she cried wildly, clutching at me. "No, I swear by the holy name I did not. I did not. I watched him, spied upon him, But listen, it was because he would not be warned that he met his death. Matt, I could not save him. Ah, I am not so bad as that, I will tell you. I have taken his notebook, and torn out the last pages and burnt them. Look, in the grate. The book was too big to steal away. I came twice and could not find it. There, will you let me go? If you will tell me where, and came twice and could not find it. There, will you let me go? If you will tell me where and how to seize Dr. Fu-Manchu and Je. Her hands dropped, and she took a backward step. A new terror was to be read in her face. "I dare not, I dare not. Then you would if you dared." She was watching me intently. "Not if you would go to find him," she said. And with all that I thought her to be, the stern servant of justice that I would have had myself, I felt the hot blood leap to my cheek at all which the words implied. She grasped my arm. "Could you hide me from him if I came to you, and told you all I know?" The authorities calm, her expression changed. "They can put me on the rack if they choose, but never one word would I speak. Never one little word, if they choose, but never one word would I speak. For never one little word." She threw up her head scornfully. Then the proud glance softened again. "But I will speak for you." Closer she came, and closer, until she could whisper in my ear. "Hide me from your police, from him, from everybody, and I will no longer be his slave." My heart was beating with painful rapidity. I had not counted on this warring with a woman. Moreover, it was harder than I could have dreamt of. For some time I had been aware that by the charm of her personality and the art of her pleading, she had brought me down from my judgment seat. Shad had made it all but impossible for me to give her up to justice. Now I was disarmed. Hubert in a quandary. What should I do? What could I do? I turned away from her and walked to the hearth, in which some paper ash lay, and yet emitted a faint smell. Not more than 10 seconds elapsed, I am confident, from the time that I stepped across the room until I glanced back. But she had gone. As I leapt to the door, the key turned gently from the outside. "My-ish," came her soft whisper, "but I am afraid to trust you yet. Be comforted, for there is one near who would have killed you had I wished it. Remember, I will come to you whenever you will take me and hide me." Light footsteps pattered down the stairs. I heard a stifled cry from Mrs. Dolan as the mysterious visitor ran past her. The front door opened and closed.